So welcome everyone to the Media Digital Drop-In. My name is Sarah Benoit. I'm the lead instructor of the JB Media Institute. And I'm here today with brand journalist Mandy Gardner from JB Media Group Marketing Agency. And I'm really excited today because at least for the last few months, I've really just been having conversations with other experts in the marketing field. And I feel like it's really important, even though I love making presentations, as you all know, and giving you ebooks to take home to work on. The last 18 months of the world has been very weird and different, and there's been huge opportunities and there's been lots of struggle. And I feel like one of the best things that we can do from a JB Media perspective is really tap into the experts that we have and talk about different subjects, and especially get that firsthand experience that people are having. So even though, like I said, I love presentations and data and thinking about the bigger concepts, I also think most of us are doing marketing in this day-to-day grind, right? It's like this hour by hour world that we're living in. And sometimes things are moving and shifting really fast. So I really appreciate you coming today just to share the experience. Because I know a lot of what you do is that like day-to-day, really hands-on with the clients, really getting to know them in a deeper way. And so hopefully all of you know our topic for today is blogging because you signed up for the webinar. But that's what we're going to talk about today is blogging and really the role that it plays. And what I think is most powerful about blogging is that it really is what you make it. It literally is what you make it. You know, we talk a lot in digital marketing about how different platforms are tools and you get to decide what the tool does, right? You get to decide what the tool creates, how it impacts your business. You basically infuse the tool with your intention, with the purpose of your brand and your work. And I think when it comes to just tools that are really flexible in this way, to me, blogging is one of the most powerful ones. I just feel like it literally can be applied to so many different things. It has social media value. It has search engine optimization value. It can be about building your brand image and your culture. It can be about educating people. It can be made up of all sorts of different types of media, video, written, graphics. It really is this kind of catch-all. So that's why I think blogging is so confusing to people, because it's literally this massively creative space where you choose what the value of the blog is to your business. How it's impacting your website is really about how you're using it. And it can evolve over time. So you can start a blog with one purpose, and down the road, you can listen and learn from the people you're connecting with, and you can watch that blog evolve into serving other purposes. So that's where I think having a conversation with somebody like Mandy today is really important, because I think that approach is really how JB Media Group as a whole approaches content in some ways, but really looking at the clients and figuring out who their audiences are, and then saying, how can we create a blog that's really going to serve people and be super valuable, instead of just having stuff out there that's just sitting there that's like sort of purposeless, right? We want to avoid that. So my first question today is just, you know, you're really a brand journalist, not just a blogger. So can you share with everybody really quickly, like, what does that mean as far as your work and kind of how you see yourself in the role that you play with clients?
Yeah, I mean, my title changed because the industry changed, really. You know, I started working at JB Media a little over 9 years ago. And, you know, back then we were still trying to create content that would serve people, but it was much more, you know, the search engines were not as sophisticated back then. And so, you know, it was really about keyword density and things like that. And then over time, the expectations around the quality of that content got much higher, and so it became important, you know, not just to be writing consistently about the topics that you want to be known for, be found for online, but that you were really producing the highest quality possible content about that, and just when I talk about high quality content, I primarily am thinking about the way that Google defines high quality content, which is content that serves the purpose, serves a purpose to the user, and it has really high levels of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And I can, I can answer questions about that stuff later on, but really it's just, part of it is having it's more than just, I'm gonna, write some thoughts on a topic now. It's really thinking through that process of who are we, who are the people we're trying to connect with, and what are the stories that we need to tell them that really illustrate our impact, and what are the things that we can provide to those people that they will find either entertaining or valuable in some way, and will hopefully help lead them to take that next step towards becoming our client or becoming our member of our organization or a donor or whatever the end goal is that you have for them. So brand journalist really just means, I oftentimes for our clients I'm sort of an embedded storyteller in the organization, and can help mine the expertise within an organization, and also just the bank of stories within an organization, and find opportunities to create compelling content that serves a goal.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Because I feel like two things. One, what Mandy's referring to is the EAT principle, right? That is really big with Google authority. And Molly's heard me mention this a few times over the last few weeks, but I have recently had somebody in an event I was at say, tell us what your guerrilla marketing tactics are. How can we, win immediately? And I was like, my guerrilla marketing tactic for you is be awesome. Be awesome. That's actually what Google wants, right? That's the content should be awesome. That's what we're aiming for. So there's no really gaming the system. It's kind of like the quality has to be the quality. And Google's AI and their algorithm are so smart. There's a lot of things defining quality. So you have to be able to kind of work on that. I also think that, one thing I've watched you do with clients is discover who the business or the brand really is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, a really powerful process that makes all of their digital marketing so much better, so much more effective, because it's really this pathway of discovery that I watch you walk people through, to where suddenly they see all these stories that they've never seen before, or all this sort of value to the stories that maybe they just haven't assigned because they've lived it. And I see this question, is it better to have a singular focus to a blog, donor facing or client facing, versus a blog that reaches both audiences? Is it possible to do both with one blog if content rotates to suit both audiences? Do you want to answer that, Oleg?
It really, you're probably going to hate me for saying this, but it depends. I always recommend having an ideal reader for the pieces of content that you produce. It makes things more interesting. Specificity is much more interesting than being general. So if you have a specific thing to offer that's going to be valuable equally to multiple audiences, then that's great. Yeah, you can write it to both of them. But it really it just depends on what the subject matter is, and what you really need out of that piece of content in return. I always put out a little graphic that's like the best content opportunities are the ones that are right there at the intersection of the audience's needs, the goals for growth that the organization has, and your unique expertise as a brand, as an organization. If you can find something that highlights your unique expertise, serves something that the audience, the main primary audience, really needs or wants, and also helps drive them down a path towards whatever that conversion goal is, then it's totally worth putting the effort into creating it. So when you're doing that balance, you know, when you're doing that calculation, as you're planning out your you know, a whole blogging strategy, you need to think through that stuff, and you need to think through it on a case-by-case basis, on a piece-by-piece basis.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. I think one of the great things about blogging, especially when you do it over time, is, you know, you really can look at the data. So if you have one blog, and Trinity, to answer your question, yeah, that question was about basically, do you need to have one blog with sort of one main focus, or can you be writing blogs that speak to different audiences and cover different topics? And I have to agree with Mandy, it really depends. But one of the things you can do, because I think for a lot of businesses, having multiple separate blogs feels a little crazy. Right? We're already generating tons of content. So I don't ever want to make more work for clients if we don't have to. So what I can look at is we've got one blog already on the website. How do we look at the topics, do what Mandy just described, figure out who the audiences are that we want to serve, what our goals are, and what's unique about us. Start writing content about the things that fall in that little place. And then over time, we're going to see which blog posts are performing better. We're going to see which things are showing up on Google more. We're going to see which posts are getting more traffic. And that actually teaches us along the way, should we continue to diversify because we're getting different audiences, or is there one audience that's really rising to the top? And those topics are getting a lot of attention. Because when I can see that there's a topic, maybe it's trending in an industry, or there's just something going on in the world that's kind of blowing that topic up, all of a sudden I'll be like, well, let's adapt the strategy and talk about that while it's super relevant, and hold off on some of these other topics which aren't driving quite as much interest. We can always circle back around to those later and continue to build that additional audience down the road. But I do think, especially if you're a blogger, so keeping in mind the difference between a company that's basically using a blog to produce content in different ways versus a person who's like a personal brand or an influencer, and they're becoming a blogger, right? They might be even writing multiple times per day. They might be posting pretty regularly on their social media. When you're a blogger, I feel like that process is a lot of what you do, right? You're watching the stats, you're watching what's getting results, and you're adapting your content strategy regularly, so that you're really producing the most relevant content at the right time. I think with businesses, because we don't necessarily have to churn out as much content as a brand when we're doing blogging, I feel like that's where we have a little bit more space and time to think through those things. So that's where you might find one audience does get so excited about the content eventually, maybe they do need their own space to just be present with the content, or maybe the whole blog needs to start focusing just on those topics or just on that audience. So if that proves out in the data, I think that really helps to make those decisions. And I see this question, Ashley, how do you advise keeping content up to date over time? Is it better to update older posts again and again with new content, publish new posts, and keep old ones up, or remove old posts as they're outdated and publish new posts in their place? And of course, hi, Mandy. But I love that question. So I want to let you jump in on this, because I know the agency specifically, y'all have talked a lot about this over time.
I mean, I think that, you know, it kind of depends on how, like, look at you don't want to change the URL structure. So like if it's got a date, if it's got like a static date that's in the URL, like I don't know if I would necessarily keep updating that one with fresh information. But if you set it up in such a way so that, you know, it's, you know, there's one blog that is about, let's say you've got, you know, an event that happens every year, and you just need to update the information about that, you know, then sure, go ahead, you can update that page, you know, on and on. If it's a resource page, if it's you're producing, you're keeping track of a lot of data, that you're sharing a resource that people are coming back to again and again over time, and you want to be the freshest, most up-to-date resource on that topic, yes, absolutely, you should continue to update that same a piece of content over time. So you can also, a lot of people get fresh SEO value out of old content by going in and looking to see if it needs to be optimized or updated. Search interest changes over time sometimes, and maybe there was a keyword that had a lot of interest from people that a blog post is optimized for, and maybe a new language has taken interest. You can use Google Trends actually that's a free tool that you can use through Google. You can compare different words and see which ones have more search interest. You can actually even do that by a geographic area. So if you're only targeting, one part of the one state, maybe you can look to see what language is trending in searches using Google Trends. So let's say you identify that you need to update the language. In one, you can go in and very strategically update that and re-optimize it so it starts getting traffic for whatever that new term is that you want to be found for.
Yeah, and I will say from a search engine optimization point, Mandy made a very, very important thing that we should all always remember, which is when you have blog posts that have been out there for some time, you need to check the organic search traffic that's coming to that blog post. Because one of the things that you could do that would actually hurt the flow of traffic from the search engines is actually change the URL of that blog post. So that's why sometimes you'll see there's an older blog post. If you look at the URL, maybe it was written in 2019, but when you hit the blog and you look at that individual post, at the very top, it'll say, updated June 1st, 2021, right? To immediately indicate to the reader that that content has been updated. But that way we didn't have to change that URL, even if it had the original date in it. Mm-hmm. Because once Google has given authority to that blog post, which essentially is a page on your website, mm-hmm. once that blog post has authority, changing that URL can really impact that in a negative way. And Mickey's asking, hi, Mandy, how do you know how often to incorporate local content into a business or organization's blog?
Hey, Mickey, I'm a local content. Do you just mean content about the local region that the brand serves? If that's super relevant to the business, then sure, yeah. If you're focused really on one community, and there are news stories coming up about that community that would be of interest to your audience, and you want to share content about that, then that would be fine. Local events, goings on, new businesses. Again, it's relevance. Think about the relevance of that content to the audience. If it makes sense to the brand, if it's something that is really of interest to the target audience, and it benefits your business in some way to share that information, then I see no problem with sharing that kind of information. But again, you always want to have that filter on where you're like, what is the value to our core focus audiences? What is the value to us as an organization? You want to constantly be thinking about those things when you're considering what to share through your blogging efforts.
Yeah, and Mickey, I would say it's a little less about being relevant to the topic, mm-hmm. and more what Mandy's saying, which is being relevant to the people that you're writing for, or the people that you're creating the content for. And that it's relevant to your own business and the goals that you serve. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I want people to, and you can feel free to disagree with this, but my gut feeling at this point about blogs in general, especially for brands, is I would rather you wrote better quality content less of the time than lower quality content that's not relevant more of the time. Mm-hmm. So there's often this pressure, right? Especially because bloggers exist and we think, oh my gosh, those people write 3 times a day on their blog. My company, how are we going to do that? So then you're creating content that's like filler. And I just have to say personally, I'm not a big fan of it. I think we're past that. I think we dilute the relevance of our content if we just start adding things for the sake of adding them. So it's like even just beyond the topical, right? It's more about like, does this really serve the business and what we're trying to accomplish? And the people that we're creating content for, do we feel like there's real value for them in this topic? So if it's a local event, does it feel like it's appropriate for both of those things?
Yeah, and Mickey, what you said, it sounds like you're saying you really need to know your audience. I am absolutely agreeing with that and saying, yes, you need to know your audience very well. If you haven't, even if you're a small organization, you need to have some kind of audience persona work done. It doesn't have to be, a massive, document, but you need to have a general idea. And I would say the process of creating a persona should not be purely speculative. At least over time, in the beginning, you can say, well, we have an idea of who our audiences are, and this is who we think they are. But then you need to start really paying attention to who are the people that are engaging with you, who are the people that are purchasing your products or your services, and note their characteristics. When I say you need to have an ideal reader in mind for your content, that ideal reader should be sort of based on a real person that in your mind represents that audience. Somebody who is the ideal person that you would want to read that piece of content and engage with you because you've served them before in some capacity. And you can sort of like look to them. And I've actually I've created a product for us called the Content Branding Guide, where I do that work for clients that we serve. And I actually interview former clients and people who work within the organization to find out what the needs and interests of the target audience, or we're trying to move away from the phrase target audience. It's a little bit violent, we think. So we're moving more towards focus audiences or key audiences. So, you can actually have a conversation with people, do a little audience listening work to see what are their real challenges, what are their real needs, what do they love about your brand, why are you the organization that they turn to for whatever it is that they turn to you for. And all of those things will help you make better decisions about what kind of content to produce, and see better results when you produce something that's really valuable.
And I just want to say, I've worked with at least 2 clients over my career where we went and spoke to like their top 5 or top 10 customers. We're talking small companies, not with thousands of customers, with just a small group of customers. I said, I want the top 5 to 10. We went and asked them some questions, and 2 times we found that they were like, yeah, I'm never going to read your blog. Like the literal customers were just like, it's not going to be on my priority list, right? We'd rather you sent us an email and this is what we need out of it every month. We'd rather that we interacted on your Facebook and this is how we want to do it. And so it was interesting that sometimes in really doing a little bit of that work, you just start to understand, like, are we really creating something again that the people we're trying to reach are going to see as really valuable? Because I know there's, just like everything else in digital marketing, people will say, well, you have to have this, you have to have that, you have to have a blog, you have to have a newsletter, you have to have social media. I always argue that you don't have to have all of those things. You have to have the things that are going to be most engaging for the people that you want to attract. So that's what you actually have to do. The rest of it is really about, I think, building that relationship. And even if you have a small sliver of information, it can help you learn from people, like what's really most convenient for them. What's going to be the easiest way for them to engage. I had one other client where we did that sort of listening, and we really discovered that the videos were just better. We still have a blog, quote unquote, but the truth is, the company was already feeling stressed about the writing. It wasn't something that they could internally take on. And at the end of the day, the customers were like, we just need to update about this for like a minute. And it's like, okay, well then let's stop making them read. We can just put together a little update. We can still get some mileage out of that content with different strategies. So I think that's like just a really important piece, like Mandy said, to really get to know who it is that you want to connect with. And it can be speculative if you're just starting out, but I think eventually that listening process should hopefully be giving you the feedback you need to develop something super effective. So I want to talk a little bit about how you're doing this, because I know you and I have done classes before, and the number one thing that I hear from students when we're talking about this is they're like, it all takes too long. I don't have time for this. Like, I don't want to do all this writing and all this work and all these things. So, I think that's the truth of content production, right? If we're going to commit to something, we really do have to commit to it, because for lack of a nicer way of putting it, half-assing your content strategy isn't really going to get you anywhere. Because at the end of the day, we're still talking about marketing and communications, which to achieve success requires some level of consistency. So I'd love for you to talk about two different things here. One is generating ideas. So a lot of people, even if they're blogging once a month, if it's going to go on endlessly into the future, how do we generate fresh ideas? And then also, what are your best top tips for just being more efficient? How are you streamlining things so that for your own work, when you're writing the blogs and creating them, it's moving faster and not taking too long? And how are you advising clients to maybe make themselves more efficient as well?
I would for the process, like generating ideas piece, I would say use that filter that I was talking about. I like to say that the most creativity killing sentence in the English language that I know of is write whatever you want. It is constraint is the thing that oftentimes leads to the best creative work. So what I would say is think of that, that filter of who are we writing for? What is the value to them? What are our main goals and it doesn't have to be for the year. It can be for like a quarterly thing. Like this quarter, we want to raise this much more money, or we want to sell this many more of this kind of product or service, whatever it is. You've got a goal that you really, really want to focus on. You've got an audience maybe that you really, really want to focus on. And then you've got, a piece of your unique expertise that you want to build your online authority for that topic. So just having those things in your mind can help guide you as you're mining your internal sort of resources for blogging ideas. I would say internally, look to the people who have direct interface with your target audience on a regular basis. So prospects and leads. Just responding to customer service questions. The frontline people who are regularly interfacing with your focus audiences. Talk to them, because oftentimes they have a really great sense of what they have their finger on that pulse of what people are interested in right now. Maybe new questions are coming up. I would recommend that if you don't already have a spreadsheet set up, it can be something simple as a shared Google Sheet that anybody who interfaces with the public should have access to. If there's a question that comes up, put it in the spreadsheet. If there's do you have a resource on this topic, or whatever the requests are, just start taking note of that. And you can tag it by topic type. You can tag it by audience type, so it's easily filtered. And so you've got that internal sort of well that you can like refill with story ideas. Maybe you hear a story about somebody that purchased your product or service and did something really amazing that you never would have thought of. That's a story that can go in that story bank that you can draw upon and share later on. One idea I have on this topic is, for a long time we wrote content for a company that sells dehydrated food, and they sold a lot of cabbage to horse owners, because I guess feeding cabbage to horses can help with gastrointestinal distress in horses. And they had a story from a woman who started feeding their dehydrated cabbage to her horse. And over time, it totally healed its stomach ulcers. And though it had like less than a few months to live, according to the vet, ended up living a long, healthy life. Stories like those. So I was able to reach out to that woman and interviewed her and tell this really beautiful story about how this helps. So just keeping a story bank. I mean, if they hadn't had that story kind of like saved up in their minds, they wouldn't have been able to tell me about it, and I wouldn't have been able to write that piece of content. So just look at your internal resources. Who are the experts that are within your organization that have interesting things to share all the time that you can go to and say, for this target audience, what's the main thing that you think that they need to know that you always get questions about? And ask them. You can turn their words into a blog. I'm going to get to that, to ghostwriting, in just a minute when I talk about efficiency. So having that internal story bank is one idea. Also, externally, where can you go? I am a voracious reader of all sorts of things. Like I'm always kind of thinking through, like, this story is relevant to this client and it's really cool and interesting. And I want to dive down a rabbit hole and just look to see what content is being produced on this topic. And look for gaps in the marketplace. Look for opportunities for your brand to share a piece of expertise or a story that's on something that's really going to be super interesting and fresh, but also like add your own unique spin on that thing. You can also look for questions. There are lots of great sites out there now. Number one, Answer the Public. It's a free tool you can use. You go in, you put a keyword in there, and it will look and generate a whole range of questions that real people are asking about that specific topic. You can look through that list and see, well, here's a question I've never even heard of before. You can just Google your top keywords, see what's coming up in the top 10 results. What is out there that maybe you don't have a piece of content that covers this angle? Maybe you can, like Rand Fishkin, who was the co-founder of Moz, now runs Spark Toro. He's friend of, he's been, featured in the company a few times. He was the one who started really talking about 10x content. Your content needs to be 10 times better than the other content on a topic. So it's really helpful to just regularly Google your most important keywords, see what's coming up. And if there's a piece of content about that you haven't covered before, can you do better than what's there? You don't have to always reinvent the wheel, but you do always have to speak to your audiences, speak to, from your own perspective in a way that's going to benefit your organization.
And I'll just throw out one other website that I just started testing and using, which I'm really enjoying, is called Feedly. It's feedly.com. So if you're like me, I'm also a voracious reader, or I attempt to be when I have time. I'm signed up to all these different newsletters about different trending topics and things that I'm working as an expert in. It's like I'm trying to keep up with things. Well, my email has become like insane and unmanageable. So Feedly allowed me literally to start unsubscribing from all my newsletters. And now I just log into my Feedly and it's pulling content from all of my favorite providers. And I can organize it into little folders, even on the free version. So like I might have an SEO one, I might have a small business one, I might have a social media one, where the different publications that I'm trying to keep track of so I can stay up to date are literally just like streaming in there for me. So that way I can like have a choice each day to go in and take a look, and I can start reducing like all of the emails that I'm getting that kind of are starting to just get a little overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a really great tip. Google Trends also, you can sign up for alerts on specific topics so that you get emails when something or someone is mentioned. So that's another way of I mean, there's a million things out there. I could tell you, you could go to Quora, Quora. That's another website where people ask and answer questions. That's another free resource. Look to see all the questions that that are on there and how many people are engaging with those topics. I actually wrote a Quora piece on what is it like to live in Asheville, North Carolina. A long time ago. That's been seen by like thousands of people. There are tons and tons of questions that people are asking and answering out there. So that's a good way of getting a pulse on what people are interested in. Now, when it comes to efficiency, ghost writing is one service that I provide for my clients. I've written for a lot of busy professionals who are not professional writers. They're way too busy to write. So lawyers, investors, wealth managers, all these different folks who have a lot of expertise, but not a lot of time. So what I have done is, and I wrote a blog on how to ghost blog. If you just Google my name and ghost blogging JB Media, you will find this resource out there. But I pretty much I came up with a way of just interviewing people and getting, and it can be a simple matter of me, asking, okay, what's the number one thing that you have to share on this particular topic that you really, really want to get out to this audience. And then I set up aside from my computer, my digital recorder is my number one most valuable tool. I record people talking, and really all they kind of need to have is a thesis statement. And then they can sort of like talk out and what they want to say on that topic. And then I ask for probing questions, like let's say they say something and I'm like, well, do you have a story to illustrate that in practice? Because metaphor is very, very powerful, right? So you get all the information that you need in order to have a compelling piece of content that has a thesis statement, builds an argument, has a conclusion, provides resources, and has a call to action at the end. Okay. So I interview them, I record the full thing, and then what I do is, because there are a couple of really affordable AI transcription platforms that are out there. We use one called Descript, which you can also use. You pay on a monthly basis, and it also, you can do podcast editing with it as well, and audio, video editing with the same platform. But it will generate a transcription very quickly of whatever that content is. There's another platform called REV, which produces an AI assisted transcription for, I think it's like 25 cents a minute or something like that. So you can get a transcript back and then turn that into a Google Doc and edit it, clean it up, make it pretty, make it readable, make it like clear, all of those things. And then you share that back with the person and ask them, give them an opportunity to go in and edit it, correct anything that maybe the transcription heard wrong and you didn't catch. Maybe they left something out that's really important. So that I have used that to produce so many different kinds of content that really highlights the expertise of the people within your organization that just don't have time to write. So again, you need to have that filter of who is this for? What is the benefit to us? And then, you use that as a filter when you're interviewing the person to make sure that it's going to be hyper relevant and valuable to the audience and to your brand.
So yeah, Kay, I just wanted to answer your quick question. Do you have a list or a set of guidelines that you're speaking about today that we should consider when thinking about starting a blog for our company? Really, we don't. I should have probably mentioned in the beginning, we are going to record this, so you can go back and listen to our suggestions. I will also make sure that when Jenna sends out the recording to this tomorrow, I will find the other interview that I've done with Mandy about ghost blogging and things like that. We definitely have some other resources that I can share. So I'll put together this recording with some of our other resources so that you can investigate those. I do think when you're thinking about starting a blog for your company, if you haven't started a blog on your website before, there's just two key things I would say are really important. One is when you create the blog on your website, it really does need to be part of your domain. So you really don't want to have, let's say, a website with then a blog over here on WordPress.com, because from an SEO perspective, now your blog and your website are actually like two separate entities competing against each other for the same keyword topics. So you do really want to make sure, especially if you have a WordPress site or Squarespace or Wix or something like that, that the blog can be part of the domain. That means like on my blog for sarahbenoit.com, it's sarahbenoit.com/blog. Right? That literal feature on my website is part of my domain. That's key. And then I think the first step before you decide to start a blog is what Mandy's been sharing, which is where is that crossover between what the audiences want, what you're trying to accomplish, and what makes you unique and different in the world. That space is going to tell you the purpose of the blog that you're creating. And you might go out and reach out to those people like we talked about that have been your clients before, or other people that are in your network, and say, hey, could you give us some feedback about what we could provide that would be useful, so that you're really listening to people and thinking about how you can build something that's going to accomplish your goals, but also really be valuable to folks. And then Bill, I see your question. My company, Elation Digital, creates interactive experiences for live events, music, sports, etc., trade shows, and retailers. Our clients are agencies, marketing, full service, PR. These people are tougher to engage because they're overloaded with ads and marketing info. Plus, all agency people say they're short on time. So I'm trying to write shorter, more targeted blogs and then using these blogs in other outreach efforts, LinkedIn posts, email blasts, other social channels. Do you have any advice to engage this tough B2B audience? So thank you for this question, because it's directly related to the next question on my list, which is how blogging, like we mentioned earlier, filters into all these different content strategies that you might have, right? So you want to talk a little bit about this? I definitely have some things to say about the B2B audience, but just about how you're integrating, like he said, the blogging efforts into this other outreach efforts.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think through the promotional strategy along with, if you don't have a strategy for how you're going to help promote that to the audience, then it's not going to get any traction. You can't just publish something and then expect for people to stumble across it. Like Sarah said, email newsletters, and LinkedIn and all these different ways, like you pay attention to what works best for your brand. And then, I honestly, like I have signed up for newsletters from the specifically as an agency, like person trying to stay on top of the industry. I have signed up for newsletters from brands. Like I've stumbled across resources on LinkedIn that I found really valuable. And I was like, okay, these people are really great at making it simple for me to stay on top of things. So I'm going to sign up for their newsletter. And then when they get a new post, I get that newsletter. Really it's just paying attention to what is super valuable and providing exactly that. And if it means, like Sarah said, creating less stuff so that the stuff you do create is a lot more valuable, then awesome. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the B2B marketing piece.
Yeah, I think with B2B, there's a couple things. I think, first of all, because I really hear what you're saying, Bill, about other marketing people always being like, I'm too busy. So most of my students, my most favorite students, are the other marketing professionals. So I'm literally like coaching and working with marketing professionals every month. And we're sort of collaborating around just like all the different things we have to do and how we're all too busy and it's all overwhelming. So that narrative is just the reality. I think sometimes you do have to realize that like a client is not a good fit. So I will say, especially when you're working directly with marketing and PR people, if they're really going to say that they don't have the time to put anything into the communications for their own brand, I mean, I kind of feel like those are the type of people I have to let go of, because they really just aren't in a place to do it. And I don't want to try to force it. That's actually going to take a lot more of my time and be really frustrating. So it is okay for sometimes people just not to be in a place where they're ready. And I've had multiple people come to me saying, we want to blog. And halfway through the first meeting, I'm like, no, you don't. No, you really don't. And I don't want to get paid to chase you around and have you never follow through. So, I just want to acknowledge that sometimes we have to let those people go. But I think the people who really understand the value of it, they're going to be willing to do what Mandy suggested, which is even in a small way, allow you to extract their expertise, extract the stories, create a story bank where multiple people in the company can put together ideas. And if you can get them in a habit of even touching base with you once or twice a month, so you can confirm that those things are getting done, that's really when, to me, we start to see real productivity. I also think in the B2B world, we're often too scared to flex long form, short form. Like for some reason, in the B2B world, I feel like people are like, but every blog has to be 1,000 words. And I'm like, no, it does not. It doesn't actually even have to be written if you don't want it to be. I can make a great video and then transcribe it and then edit the transcription down. So we have a great video piece with a great piece of text to go with it. That's entirely doable. So if I'm working with B2B people, sometimes I might just need to interview them on Zoom and then use that video as part of the blog post and then put together a shorter recap of what we talk about that still gets to the point of what the heart of what Mandy's talking about, which is we know it's valuable to the audience. It accomplishes our goal, and it's something that would be unique and different that we're bringing to the table. If we can make video content about that that's short, or even shorter written form content, I think that's worthwhile. I'm a big fan of taking an idea that could be 2,000 words and saying, you know what, we're going to write 400 500 word blogs about this and part 1, 2, 3, and 4 that. Because sometimes somebody will find part 2. Now all of a sudden they're looking for part 1, 3, and 4. Right. And so I think a lot of those things are very, very viable. And I think in the B2B world, we just have to be unafraid to kind of experiment and flex. A lot of times we just want to know, like, what's the answer? What's going to work? And I'm like, we don't know. So maybe if we're writing 1 blog a week, each week we need to try something new for the first 3 months and see what happens. Because sometimes I'm shocked when the long form stuff does really well. We're like, oh, we thought the audience would be too busy, but man, this topic is something they needed. Or sometimes the video content does way better than we expected. And so if we can create a system I usually like to think in 3 to 6 month chunks, right? Where we create a system for experimenting with that with the B2B clients. And also, like, that allows us again to see, are there some audiences that might rise to the top? And we might discover that we thought the blog was for everybody. But the truth is, it's for these 2 groups of people that are really at a higher investment level in our content. And then we can really refocus the whole approach and say, you know what, we're going to spend the next 6 months talking about these 2 audiences because we can see they're more highly engaged with the topics. We're getting them to click over to other pages more, which is accomplishing our goals. Maybe we're getting them to sign up for something or download something. I also think too, as a last side note, blogging in the B2B world, data and good free shareable information is strong in that world. So if you can take your blog posts and link them to a longer ebook about a topic, if you can link them to an infographic with really important stats about something that you've collected, that's where I think the purpose of kind of paying attention and listening to the trends helps you kind of see, oh, here's what people are getting. Here's maybe something they're not getting yet, and we could provide that, right? And so I have one ebook right now on my personal website, and I link almost every blog I've written for the last year and a half to that to that actual ebook, because I feel like the ebook is exciting. It's something I want more and more people to know about, and it really establishes my personal brand. So I can keep using that as a deeper step once I've kind of hooked them with a lighter conversation, a faster conversation that's happening on my blog.
Transcription, also, Sarah mentioned transcribing videos. Descript and Rev both will transcribe a video for you. So that is, I create content all the time. Think about repurposing every piece of content that you create. If it's in one format, you can try to repurpose it in a different format to try to just get maximum value out of that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I use a transcription service called Temi, Temi. It wouldn't work if you're more soft-spoken because it is AI run, but if you're loud like me, it's perfect. As long as you have a strong voice that carries over, it'll do a really good job of picking up what you're saying in the AI and just writing out all the content for you. But we're right at 1 o'clock, so I don't want to hold anybody over since I know you have to get back to work. My last question for Mandy, though, is simply, do you have a favorite blog that you could share with everybody?
Let's see. Well, I mean, honestly, like I've started to get a lot of the blogs that I read, the material that I read through newsletter subscriptions that I have signed up for various things. I do honestly, if I really love a blog, I will sign up for their newsletter. One that I love is called Nonprofit AF, which I don't run a nonprofit, but this guy Voulet, he was a nonprofit executive in the Pacific Northwest, and he started just spilling all the tea about what's wrong with nonprofit world, and just his blogs are funny, they're informative, they're very interesting. So if you're a nonprofit, I highly recommend it. Even if you're not, take a look at nonprofitaf.org, I think, but it's you know, he always puts like a picture of kittens or, you know, puppies or something in there. And he always does a description of what the picture is for accessibility. You know, he does a lot of really fun things that can show you like really like how you can make a blog super interesting over time. He's very honest. He's very like, I'm taking a month off this month because I need it. I'm not going to be writing it all for the next month. You know, and industry stuff like Rand Fishkin, his blogs that he writes for Spark Toro are really great. If you are looking for advice on that audience listening piece and like trying to figure out like how to write for an audience, I highly recommend looking at his stuff. And of course, you know, his whole whiteboard, you know, Friday series he did for Moz was really great.
Yeah, the Moz.com blog is still one of my favorites. Jenna mentioned Think with Google. I pay attention to Think with Google every single week. Mm-hmm. And I will say, if you're local to Asheville, I'll just give a shout out to Jason Sanford. Ash Vegas is killing it these really days. He's doing a really great job. He's actually morphing his blog right now into a paid journalism model, which I'm really excited about. Awesome. So that whole aspect of creating a newsletter that basically is connected to the blog content, he's going to put that behind a payment gateway. He's been around a long time, and there's actually a lot of people that I think are really interested in supporting the local journalism that way. So, but again, thank you all so much for joining us. I want to say thanks so much to Mandy for coming and talking today and just sharing your experience. Thanks for all the great questions. Like I said, check out our August boot camp. You can always go to jbmediainstitute.com and find us there. You can also go to Eventbrite and just type in JB Media Institute, and you'll get all of our upcoming educational events. But it was great to see you all. Thanks so much. Have a great day. And as we always say, you do amazing things. More people should know. Yeah. And we hope to see you next month at our next digital drop-in. See you soon.
Good luck blogging. Thank you. Bye.